Welcome back to the Garden with Joy and Holly radio show. Happy you're with us. Time for garden questions and answers. You've got a question? Send it on over. GardenTalkRadio@gmail.com. GardenTalkRadio@gmail.com. Or you can give us a call toll free, coast to coast, 1-800-927-SHOW, 1-800-927-7469. Had a number of questions come in this week. We're going to see what we can get through to the top of the hour, Holly.
Yeah, so the first question is, at what size is good to transplant my pepper seedlings from the party cup? There are like 15 trays, so I want them to each have their own spot.
Depends on what, 3 to 4 inches is the ideal size. Sometimes life gets in the way and they get 5-6 inches tall. You really don't want to get them any taller than about 6 inches because they're going to get starting in root bound. And I think we've got a question about how to separate those in a moment. But about 3 to 4 inches, and that's a good time to when we would transplant them over into the Root Maker 32 cell trays that air prunes the roots in order to have a more fabulous root system, which is a more healthier plant. So 3 to 4 inches, and that would be a good standard for any plant that you're dealing with. About 3 or 4 inches if you're mass planting in a party cup or in a pot. And because you want to save space up front, we do that, and then we sort out and put them in their own distinct little home until they're ready to be hardened off and transplanted out. Okay, next question here. Do you add vermiculite or perlite to your soil?
So we do not, but there's so vermiculite and perlite are not the same thing. Vermiculite is better for water retention, and that means that the moisture retains key nutrients for your plants and cuttings to soak up. And then perlite is more for drainage. So it means that like it's going to help break up heavy soil, whether you have clay soil or sandy soil, it's going to help with that. We don't add perlite or vermiculite to ours because we use compost.
Compost will do basically the same thing. It'll help break it apart. That density of clay and or will begin to build soil in the particular situations where you have very loose and porous soil. So, and when you look at by volume, compost is really much cheaper by the bulk than the bag of vermiculite or perlite. But each situation is different and your mileage may vary. Just because one person doesn't mean on YouTube or an article, that doesn't mean that that's the right answer for you. You got to do your research, but that is our thoughts on that.
Now, if you've been adding vermiculite or perlite to your compost forever, just keep doing it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. There you go. Okay, what's wrong with my tomato starts? They are curling up. Are they overwatered? Too much light? The soil is soggy to the touch. I'm afraid I overwatered them. Could it be root rot?
Yeah, so overwatering can cause leaf curl, and underwatering, they are sitting water that can cause root rot. Too close to light might be a cause. So what you want to do is let them dry up a little bit. That should help. And then you can get yourself on a watering schedule so you're not drowning your plants.
If you're bottom watering, the water should not be setting stagnant in the tray. You should allow the water to wick up in an hour time and then drain off the excess water that's in that tray. That's where the root rot is going to develop. If the plants are underwatered and the soil is extremely dry, they'll curl up too. It's just as bad both ways that you're damaging the cell wall of these plants if you're overwatering or underwatering. You want the soil to be damp, like a sponge, consistently, just like you would have on a drip irrigation system out in the garden. So keep that in mind. It also has a lot to do with your atmosphere in your home. If it's a very dry atmosphere, those plants, those seedlings, those trays are going to dry out much, much quicker than they would if it was more of a humidity, more higher humidity. So, keep that in mind. Also, the light can have something to do with it, but mainly it's either you're overwatering or underwatering, and if you've got root rot, you might be able to save the plants, but back off on the watering.
All right, so another question is, what is the best way to separate my seedlings? I have them planted in cells from mass planting.
To put them in cells for mass planting. Mass planting. That's what I was referring in the first question. I knew there was another one coming here. So, this is the only exception to don't let them dry out. You want these to dry out almost completely. Let's say you have a party cup, solo cup, rest in peace, Toby Keith. You want to let them, he passed away.
I know.
Okay. You didn't. Okay. Anyway, so you want to let the let's say there's 15 pepper plants in that party cup. You want it to dry out almost completely. Tipping the party cup upside down and caressing your hand around the soil, not the plants. Then laying the plants on a hard surface and then rolling it back and forth to let all of that soil, that dry soil, break apart and away from the root system. Then you can gently remove the seedling and put it in its individual cell with good hydrated potting soil, slow release fertilizer, that type of material, and you're good to go. You don't want to start tearing them apart, because when you start tearing them apart, you're going to damage roots and damage plants.
Right.
It doesn't always work that way, but that's the best way we have found. You're going to have some casualties. That's just the way it is, but that's the way it's going to be best for you to separate those plants.
All right, so we had another question here. Marilyn, this is from one of my friends. The house where I grew up is in Southern California, about 5 miles from Disneyland, Zone 10A. I have a lot to do. It's nearly half acre. Over the last several years, I stopped watering, so the lawn is mostly dead and gone. I've considered different rainwater harvesting options and switching from sprinklers to drip. Right now, I've got some baby tomato plants to put in the ground. I'm thinking of trying out some Oya balls connected to a simple bucket. Also digging and amending a 3-inch deep before bed behind a waist-high retaining wall. It's alongside the garage. I'll start some asparagus roots, strawberries, and leafy greens there. Any advice before I start growing more or start growing at all? I had suggested definitely getting a soil test done.
In the raised beds. Let the grass go. The grass is done. Don't worry about that. That's a waste.
Yeah, no, I don't think she's wanting to do anything with the grass.
That's just part of the story of the backstory on. Okay.
And I did explain to her that, she understands that we're not in the same zone here where we are.
Right.
But, and I did suggest some other resources for her as well, like university extensions, things like that, local university extensions. But I would suggest a soil test from Soil Savvy.
Irrigation system, either Oyas or a timer system like DripWorks has, works really good, or Eaton Brothers. They have a soaker hose system with timer, because you want to, in Southern California, it's going to be hot 14 months out of the year. So you want to have a lot of moisture, consistent moisture, not over watering. And that's kind of what we harp about a lot on the program, is don't over water. You want just enough. Damp. Make it damp. So, so that will be good. Soil test, irrigation system of some sort. Let the garden work for you. Don't work the garden to make it work for you.
Right. It's absolutely smart to, restore what you can. But again, just be realistic. And I also said, start small. Don't overdo it. Otherwise, you're not going to enjoy it as much as you perhaps want to.
All right, next question here. What do you think of Florida weave trellising for tomatoes? We talked a little bit about this in segment 2 on gardening on a budget. It's a method in which you utilize heavy-duty metal posts and string in 1-foot increments up the post across the garden or across the tomato bed, in which the tomato plants will weave, and you'll have to help them up and through each string. And the string, as the tomato bears fruit, begins to get heavier and hangs on that string. So you don't need a tomato cage. Works very well, very cost effective. People will often use juke rope or an all natural twine.
Some people use wire too.
We use agricultural twine. What they wrap the big round bales with in the field. You can get a 6,000 foot, it's 20,000 foot ball of orange twine, which you'll never use up. Right. It doesn't biodegrade. It is a plastic, but it will never, you don't have to worry about the tomatoes getting too heavy and it's snapping the string. That's for sure.
It's very durable, and it's not going to, get in the elements, the rain.
These are designed to go on these big bales and not be damaged. Years ago, it used to be natural twine, then you'd have mice get in there, and then the weather and the bales would bust apart when you try to move it. So they then went with this plastic, and there's yellow, and then there's orange, and there's a thicker twine and a thinner twine. We use the thinner twine, 20,000 feet. That's like 6.5 miles. You're going to have plenty of string for the kids to play with and in the garden with no problem at all. If you're a purist and you want to be more environmentally friendly, there are natural twines in a much smaller capacity. I think there's like 6,000 feet on the natural twine, so you can go that route. All right. Have you ever done a Three Sisters planting? I've never grown corn.
Well, so corn, when you grow corn, it is a heavy nitrogen feeder, so you are going to have to boost your soil with nitrogen, and we have done this.
Well, explain the Three Sisters gardening concept and why there's kind of a misconception about it.
Sure. So Three Sisters is theoretically that you grow the corn becomes a trellis for the beans, you grow pole beans, and then you grow squash within that same garden plot as ground cover.
And people think that the beans create nitrogen to feed the corn, which is simply not the case.
No, it's not the case. Scientifically proven time and time again that there's not enough nitrogen coming off the roots of the beans to feed the corn. However, the concept of the squash being ground cover, the beans using the corn as a trellis, and the corn being a trellis is absolutely correct. That can occur. But as far as the beans feeding the soil nitrogen and the corn being able to access that nitrogen is not true. So you want to make sure you do have high nitrogen in your soil before you start planting that corn. I also told this person that corn does need to be grown in blocks of like 4, 8, etc. because it's air pollinated. So it's not typically where you can grow it in rows, but they have to be rows next to each other.
So it's something to look into. There's some ways to do it right, and there's a lot of ways to do it wrong. Well, that brings us to what we learned today. Holly, what did you learn today?
I learned that you like to eat kale as a garnish.
Okay. I learned
ever since the beginning of time,
and I learned that in the study for this show that there are about 100 varieties of cucumbers. Honey, what we learned today is brought to you by honeybeehealthy.com.
Whether you're a gardener, a bee hobbyist, or a professional beekeeper, Honey Bee Healthy Inc. has the product to help you maintain a healthy, hive, and thriving garden. For more information on how to use Honey Bee Healthy in your garden, visit honeybeehealthy.com. That's honey, the letter B, healthy.com.